Maine, North Carolina, Mississippi. Wow. Welcome. We're glad you're here. We'll get started promptly at 4 p.m. Thank you for joining us. We'll be getting started. Here we go. Thank you so much. We're glad you're here today. Well, hello and welcome. My name is Althea Rowe, and thank you for joining us for this 30-minute webinar in our Research to Policy Critical Conversations in Language Education series. This year's theme is Let's Be Real about Literacy Development for Multilingual Learners. We will focus on addressing the real-world challenges and opportunities in supporting literacy development for multilingual learners. Through dynamic discussions with leading voices in the field, we will explore innovative strategies, research-centered approaches, and practical policy insights to enhance literacy outcomes for diverse multilingual learners. Today's webinar is Literacy Practices and Students with Interrupted Formal Education, and we will be speaking with Michelle Marrero-Colon. I am also joined by Maribel Marrero-Colon, Marguerite Lutz, and Nick Scherf. We are recording this webinar and will post the recording on our website after the event. Before we begin, please mute your microphones to avoid interruptions. You can activate closed captioning by pressing the closed caption button at the bottom of your screen. This event is provided as a public service. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed belong solely to the guest speakers and do not necessarily represent the views of our organization. Our panel comprises esteemed experts who work at the intersection of research, policy, and practice in language education, language access, and equity. You can learn more about them on the webinar's webpage. Nick will share the link in the chat. We do encourage you to ask questions via the Q&A box throughout the call. We will answer as many as possible at the end of our discussion. It's an excellent opportunity to tap into the wealth of knowledge we are fortunate to have here today. Also, please click the chat button at the bottom of your screen to share your thoughts and comments anytime. Try it now by letting us know where you're listening from today. And with that, I will now pass the microphone to our facilitators.
Super. Thank you so much, Althea, and greetings to everyone from everywhere, all time zones who are joining us. Michelle, we're so thrilled to have you here with us. The first question, can you tell us a little bit, how did you become interested in this topic? And based on your work, what do you see as 2 to 3 high priority issues that we need to be paying attention to? And why are these so important right now?
Thank you very much. And before I answer the question, I'd like to express my sincere gratitude for this opportunity. It is truly an honor to be part of the Research to Policy Critical Conversations in Language Education series. It all began when my dissertation chair, Dr. Charlene Desir, met with me and said, "Future Dr. Marrero, you can do better than the topic you chose. Think about a life-changing moment from your professional journey." So I did. She took me into a back trip. And my interest in this topic grew directly from that challenge. The pivotal point came when I met a student from Afghanistan who had never attended school before. This was her very first time in any formal educational setting. While she was enthusiastic and highly motivated to learn, I needed to start with the most foundational skills, such as teaching her letters, sounds, and basic math concepts. I often felt unprepared and questioned whether I was truly the right teacher for her, as I wasn't equipped or trained to teach early literacy or foundational math. Witnessing the immense difficulty she faced navigating a high school environment while acquiring these basic skills left a profound impact on me. And it compelled me to examine more closely the systems that exist and often the gaps that persist for students like her. This personal experience ultimately shaped and inspired my research in Arlington, which focuses on supporting adolescent students with limited or interrupted formal education, who are also known as SLIFE or SIFE. Based on all the work, I see three urgent priorities. The first is about ensuring access to grade level content while also establishing intentional time and structures to support the development of emergent literacy. Too often, SLIVE are placed in general ESOL programs designed for students who already have literacy in their first language. These students, however, or SLIVE, may be learning to read for the first time in their lives in any language. So we have to rethink our timelines and expectations. As the research shows, pushing SLIVE through high school graduation requirements within 4 years is simply not realistic for many of them. There's some that could do it, but the majority of them for the 4 years is just too short of a time. Instead, we need programs that integrate literacy with content learning, use developmental approaches, and recognize literacy as foundational, not as remedial. The second priority, which is just as critical, is meeting the social emotional needs of SLIFE and creating truly safe, welcoming, trusting environments. Adolescents SLIFE often come from backgrounds that may include trauma, or they have lived years without school before enrolling. Therefore, it's essential to create learning spaces that are culturally responsive, student-centered, and where building trusting relationships is at the heart of the work. Research shows that students' learning accelerates when they feel safe and are not afraid to take risks. Even simple practices like using greetings in their students' first language, displaying their country's flags, or incorporating music from their cultures into their learning help lower anxiety and foster belonging. Teachers who intentionally build these relationships see students open up and engage more fully, which is fundamental for their literacy and social adjustment. The third high priority area is around developing specialized supports and innovative programming that honor the student's linguistic assets. One example we're exploring at APS is dual language literacy work, especially pilot projects with Spanish-speaking students that build literacy in their first language alongside English. Research highlights how stronger skills in their native language or first language actually accelerates literacy development in the target language. In this case, it will be English. So supporting bilingualism or multilingualism is not just culturally affirming, it's actually academic strategic. We also see the power of competency-based approaches like vocational programs, which allow students to develop hands-on skills and earn certifications even if they're still building literacy. This was the case of a former student of mine who we're going to refer to as Ronaldo. Ronaldo is a student from Guatemala who, despite the limited formal schooling, thrived in auto tech by building on his interests and prior life experiences. And through close collaboration between his ESOL teachers and the career center staff, Ronaldo not only gained a valuable certification, but is now currently employed in a reputable company and planning to continue advancing within this field. All of these priorities are urgent. Without them, we continue to fail students who are often already marginalized. These are students who, if given the right support, literacy instruction tailored to their needs, culturally and emotionally supportive classrooms, and innovative pathways like dual language or vocational programs, can absolutely thrive. At the end of the day, it's about building systems that truly see and serve these students, not just to push them through.
Okay, so got to tell you, I love your priorities. They're pretty much alongside mine. So when you are considering these priorities, What changes would you like to see in policy and practice?
That's an excellent question. There are several crucial shifts I believe we need to take, both in policy and in our day-to-day practice. First, we need more rigorous and research-based ways to identify SLIFE. In Virginia, for example, the Virginia Department of Education, or the VDOE, requires school divisions to ask 3 screening questions at enrollment to determine whether an English learner might also be a student with limited or interrupted formal education. While this is a starting point, Arlington Public Schools recognize that these questions alone were insufficient to capture the full picture. So in response, APS developed the SLIFE interview protocol, a tool grounded in the research of the Kapua, Marshall, and myself. Over a 2-year period, APS collaborated with wide range of stakeholders, including assistant principals, directors of counseling, the L counselors, L teachers, department chairs, lead teachers, to create a more comprehensive approach. This year, the 24-25 school year, marked the first implementation of this protocol. Key staff received a 3.5-hour training on how to administer this live interview protocol effectively. The results have already underscored its value. As of June 20th, APS identified 17 students as SLIFE who had not been flagged by the original VDOE screening questions alone. This highlights how critical it is to have thoughtful, context-specific identification processes. I would like to see similar protocols developed and implemented statewide or nationwide so that we are consistently and accurately identifying SLIFE and ultimately providing them with the support they deserve. Second, we must ensure that no matter the context, SLIFE have structured opportunities to develop emergent literacy. Too often, secondary students are immediately immersed in grade level content courses without dedicated time to build foundational reading and writing skills. This is particularly concerning for students who may be learning to decode and comprehend text for the very first time in a language that is not their home language. I would like to see policy that requires schools to include intentional time in the master schedule or academic schedule, whether through designated courses, intervention blocks, or co-taught models, so emergent literacy is treated as essential and not supplementary. Finally, we have to speak about funding. Supporting SLIFE effectively is resource intensive. It means smaller class sizes, hiring and training specialized staff like literacy interventionists and bilingual counselors, purchasing appropriate instructional materials, and providing ongoing professional development for teachers. Right now, many schools are forced to piece these supports together from already stretched budgets. I would like to see state and federal policies that explicitly allocate funding for SLIFE programming, recognizing that these students' needs extend well beyond what's covered under standard L services. Ultimately, these changes better identification, guaranteed time for literacy development, and sustained funding are about equity. They ensure that SLIFE are not overlooked or left to struggle in systems that weren't designed with their unique experiences in mind.
Thank you so much, Michelle. There's a lot of interest in this tool that you mentioned working
Yes.
on. I know there's some questions in the chat about that. To dig a little deeper into what you've been talking about, this research to policy. Now we want to shift into the practice realm. What changes in practice would you recommend for teachers at the classroom level, at the school level, at the district level? Because as we know, teachers we don't know how to do this at the secondary level.
Well, that's an excellent question because meaningful change for SLIVE occurs through the daily work of district schools and classrooms educators. First, I would recommend implementing the identification practices, like I stated, that are nuanced enough to reveal students' specific literacy needs. As previously mentioned, in Arlington, we found that the standard state required screening questions are not effectively identifying students who are required additional support. So to address this, we have developed the interview protocol, the SLIFE interview protocol. That comprehensive protocol moves from the surface level questions to examine the students' educational histories and uncover gaps in literacy development. This underscores why every district needs rigorous research-based identification tools because accurately knowing who needs help is the essential first step. Identification must be also immediately followed by deliberate structured support for emergent literacy. Too often, systems stop after labeling students without a thoughtful plan to advance their literacy growth. Districts and schools must embed intentional time within the school day dedicated to building foundational reading and writing skills alongside grade level content learning. This means scheduling dedicated literacy classes, intervention blocks, or robust co-teaching models that provide students with daily targeted practice. It is the only way to address the reality that many SLIVE are still acquiring the most basic literacy skills. Just as critical, students need frequent opportunities to speak. We have to let them speak and be immersed in language-rich environments where they can build oral proficiency, academic vocabulary, and confidence in using English. Emergent literacy programs should be intentionally designed not only for students who are still developing print literacy, but also for those who are simultaneously building oral language. Such programs must integrate the four language domains. Every lesson should have speaking, listening, reading, and writing in meaningful ways to ensure comprehensive language development. Third, we must elevate the importance of literacy in students' first language. Research consistently demonstrates that developing literacy in a student's home language lays a critical foundation for literacy and academic success in the targeted language. This summer, Arlington Public Schools, we started yesterday, launched a new initiative. We called it Pathways to Success, which will provide native language support, literacy support for those students who need it. This is an important step because supporting literacy in a student's first language strengthens cognitive processing, builds confidence, and accelerates English development. I would strongly encourage other districts to explore similar models that actively develop students' first language literacy rather than treating it as a separate or secondary. Fourth, we must prepare all teachers, not just L teachers, not just L specialists, to support emergent literacy. Most secondary educators have had limited or no training in how to scaffold instruction for students who are still learning to decode or compose simple text. I was one of them. Professional development is essential to ensure that all teachers understand how to incorporate language objectives, scaffold academic texts, and create opportunities for foundational literacy practice. Literacy cannot be viewed solely as the responsibility of the English teachers or the L departments. It is a shared responsibility. When all educators embrace their role as language and literacy teachers, we create inclusive classrooms where SLIFE can genuinely engage and grow. Finally, and I think most importantly, we must embrace a shift in mindset. Too often, the conversation about SLIFE is framed around what they cannot do, what they lack, what they not yet know. This deficit perspective limits expectations and opportunities. Instead, we must focus on the rich backgrounds, the experiences, and resilience that SLIFE bring into our classrooms. They possess cultural and linguistic assets that, when recognized and nurtured, enrich our entire school communities. This mindset shift from viewing SLIFE through the lens of their gaps to appreciating their strengths must underpin every policy, program, and instructional practice we design. Altogether, these practices, thoughtful identification, intentional support for literacy in both English and the student's first language, comprehensive professional development for all educators, and above all, a strength-based mindset are what truly transform outcomes for SLIFE. They move us beyond simply placing these students in our schools to actually supporting them to thrive.
Okay, Michelle, you are passionate about this. And also, you've answered a lot of my third question. So can you, like, since we're running out of time, can you quickly summarize then, based on what you just spoke about, what's your call to action for educators and for districts and what's going on?
Yes. So as we discussed earlier, we must prioritize accurate identification. Too often, students with limited or interrupted formal education go unnoticed or are misidentified, which means they miss out on critical supports. We need every school district to adopt robust research-based identification protocols like the one developed in Arlington that go beyond surface level enrollment questions to truly understand students' educational histories and literacy gaps. Another critical call to action is to revisit and thoughtfully evolve how we label SLIFE. Recognizing that the term itself can carry a deficit perspective by centering what students lack, I want to be clear that this is no way intended to undermine the seminal work of the Kapua and Marshall, whose research has provided essential foundation for how we identify and support these students. Instead, it builds upon their scholarship by exploring how our identification practices and even our terminology might better reflect a growth-oriented view that highlights students' strengths, assets, and future potential, not just for their educational gaps. Moving to our identification processes that balance urgency with a recognition of students' rich backgrounds is a direction well worth pursuing, so long as it does not compromise our responsibility to swiftly and precisely identify those who need foundational literacy and academic support. Second, we must ensure that literacy development, both in English and in the student's first language or languages, is at the center of our response. This means embedding emergent literacy instruction into students' daily schedules, not treating it as an add-on. It also means valuing and intentionally building on students' first language literacy, which research consistently shows is foundational to their long-term success. Third, driving all of this critical need for funding, we must advocate for dedicated resources to ensure SLIFE receive the support they truly need, train counselors who understand their unique social, emotional, and academic challenges, literacy interventionists, smaller class sizes, and appropriate instructional materials. Without this level of investment, even the strongest policies and best design practices cannot be fully implemented or sustained. So my call to action is this: identify carefully and comprehensively, change the label SLIFE for one that has a growth mindset, prioritize literacy, English, and home language, and funding. And this is how we move from a well-meaning intentions to lasting impact for SLIFE.
Awesome.
Thank you so much,
Mm-hmm.
Michelle. We have questions in the chat, of course. And one of the things that a couple of people, we might not be able to get to all the questions, but one of the things that a couple of people raised is how do you staff that? You talked about the L1 literacy development. Who's doing that? Is there the expectation? I think this is a question we get a lot. Who is the teacher speaking 10 different languages? What's involved in that a little more?
Okay, so at APS currently, we are in Virginia. So Virginia, we do have the Virginia Literacy Acts, in which now every single teacher is trained on the in literacy. So, but right now in APS, what we're doing in the secondary level, in our English language development classes, we have all L teachers are teaching the first 12 to 15 minutes emergent literacy to the students, whether it's through 95% group or multisyllabic routine cards. But those first 12 to 15 minutes is dedicated for that, specifically for literacy instruction.
What about, we've had a couple of questions, and I think it's a really cool question because we have a lot of adults who come in as SLIFE and they're not eligible for K to 12 anymore. So we've had a couple of questions that how could you apply some of your suggestions to adult education courses?
Okay. So basically, I'm actually teaching an adult course at night at Arlington Community, which is a adult high school in Arlington Public Schools. And I do the same thing that all the teachers are doing in the comprehensive schools, in which in that English language development class, the first few minutes is all about literacy. And then after those after those 12 to 15 minutes, there will be whatever the content class or the topic that I'm going to talk about. And I make sure that in every single lesson, students have the opportunity to speak, which is what a lot of people forget, that, okay, they have to read, they have to read, they have to write. But in order for them to read and write, they have to be able to speak first. So when you go to my class, or if you do have the chance to observe my class, you will see that the students are immersed, all the adults are immersed in rich conversations about the content after the literacy instruction.
Okay, there have been a lot of questions. A lot of people have been asking for access to the protocol. Is that something that you can give us so that we can put it up when the recording from this comes out?
Yes.
Okay,
You will share it.
that's awesome.
Yes.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
There's another question, because with this emphasis on assets-based, and we have this deficit-based term, SLIFE or SIFE, what term do you recommend? What should we be calling students to shift our own mindsets?
It has to be built on strengths.
Mhm.
So that's a very good question. I have to think about it for a minute.
Oh, you had one in your head. Okay.
I would say emergent bilinguals
Mhm.
or students building foundational literacy.
Sure.
Something that is not deficit mindset. Yeah.
Sure.
I would have to say also that the SLIFE interview protocol, it is essential that whoever is going to be administering that protocol, they have to have that training. And the reason they have to have that training is because all the research out there indicates that many of the parents and also the students, if they're adults, they, for multiple reasons, for whatever reasons they have, if they some of them are under the impression that if they provide the information that they have not been in school, they might not be accepted into schools, or they're just afraid to just tell their stories. So that's why whoever is going to use the protocol has to be highly trained, and they have to make sure it's people that know how to speak to our population.
Okay.
To get
Well,
over.
Michelle, Althea has popped up. That means we are
Okay.
running out of time. We've run out of time. So Althea, help us out here.
All right, this has been great. I see the audience has been very engaged, and we'd like to thank our audience for joining us today. We certainly hope that you'll join us for the next one. Also, a big thank you to our speaker today, Michelle. This was
Thank you.
amazing. Thank you to our facilitators. We really appreciate your time and your insights. And see everyone at the next one. Thank you, Nick, as well, for manning the background logistics.
And watch your
Once again,
inbox for a follow-up with the video and some of the
yes,
research.
yep. The email with the recording and the survey will be in your email box. Please watch out for that. We look forward to your responses. Thank you once again, and see you at the next one. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.